a lot of journalism right now is influenced by this 24-hour news cycle and this kind of need for breaking news. Also, the citizen journalism and the social media videos and content that we get, it gives us a different insight into stuff, and it's great. But it also it's a surface scratching type of journalism, and there's a lot of when crisis breaks out, you often get also parachute journalism, which is when people come in who have not necessarily got much familiarity with the with the country or with the subject. And I think what what's important and what we were hoping to achieve was something slightly more in depth, something more investigative. So there were lots of rumors going around. You're hearing about certain things going on, and we wanted to go a step further and really find out what was actually happening. And we're hearing about uh, accusations of torture. Well, let's find out what actually happened in those cases. Let's follow up. Let's not just share the post or the video. Let's not just have a kind of a brief or a responsive analysis. Let's actually dig deeper and try and find out what's actually happened, and do that in collaboration with other people, with experts, with people who really know what they're talking about. Bring other expertise into the frame, and get expert opinions, not just a kind of a reporter's instant analysis. I think it's really important when you're on the ground to show not just one side of, one group of people. It's often there are groups of people that are particularly media savvy. They're very good at reaching out, and it's really important to show that there are various different demographics. In this particular story, the entire country is being affected. So you're talking about multiple different ethnic groups, multiple different religions, and many of these groups have been persecuted for a really long time anyway. And so they have a unique voice in this story, because this isn't new to them. It's stepped up, and it's maybe happening in cities and reaching different areas, but they've always been aware of the violence and the cruelty of the Burmese regime, or Burmese military, I should say. And these other groups, the more mainstream, the students, from the Burma ethnic group, this is much more shocking to them. So in lots of ways, their voices were louder, and we were hearing a lot from them. But it was really important to get a balance and show both, because it brings in a context that's vital. It's really important to know that this isn't new. This has been happening for a long time, but it's now happening across the board to almost everyone, to all these ordinary citizens, and no one's safe. And it's really opened the eyes of so many people who have been unaffected by violence and cruelty of the military before, who maybe doubted the accounts of groups and individuals who had claimed to be victims of human rights abuses and so on. They were now realizing that this stuff had been happening. And so I think, in order to fully understand the context of the country, to fully understand the story, hearing from these different voices and different people who have different lived experiences in Myanmar, is vital to fully understand the situation there. This was actually a very ethically challenging story, in regards to ethics, because obviously at the time we were filming, we were speaking to people who were actively being wanted by the police. So people who had warrants out for their arrest, people who were being pursued. And then we're also speaking to people who perhaps weren't wanted by the police, but by speaking to us, that may make them put them on the police's radar, and put them at a greater risk, because people were being arrested daily and people were being hunted down. And so even any kind of exposure obviously increases the risk for the people you speak to. So it was very challenging from an ethical point of view. I suppose we handled it by making sure that the people we were speaking to were all people that were looking to get their message out, people who wanted to speak to us, that they fully understood what they were undertaking, and that we weren't pressuring anyone, and that we took every precaution possible to make sure that we weren't exposing them exposing their location or exposing information about that might contribute to the risks that they're already taking. Well, I think journalism is a dangerous game nowadays. There's a lot of competition and there's a lot of kind of hunger to get a story, and often that pushes people to do things that probably are like teetering on the wrong side of the ethical boundaries. And I think what I really learned from this story was that although there was time, time was of the essence. Although we wanted it to be timely, we wanted to get it out quickly. Building relationships, taking the time to get to know people, taking the time to make sure that you've established trust was so important. And although there was stuff happening all the time, and it did feel like we, had to keep capturing stuff, and we were it was a rolling, unfolding situation, and therefore there was time pressure. I think taking time to make sure you're doing it properly, to not rush things, to not pressure people was really key, and that's something I would take away from that. And it also makes your interviewees more relaxed. It makes them happier to speak to you, more open. And so for me, that was a really important part of how to tell this story, was just really like working on building relationships and also keeping in touch afterwards. Like once you've done the interview, you can't just ignore people. You've got to keep in touch, keep them informed about the process, and let them know where we are when things are being put on air, because the situation is changing all the time. So from when we did the interview to when it aired, the situation had changed for those individuals as well. So keeping in touch, building strong relationships would be the main takeaways for me.